everybody, and welcome to Virtual TrekCon 5 with Sirach Lofton.
Yeah. Hello, hello.
And Melissa Longo.
Hello, hello.
Today, my name is Ryan T. Husk. We are joined by the one, the only Nana Visitor. How are you today, Nana?
I'm really good. How are you all?
Awesome. So good to have you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here always with you.
So
we miss you. We love you.
We do. Now that we're not talking about Deep Space Nine anymore, we feel like we don't have as many excuses to call on you, but we do miss you very much. You've always been so amazing to us and our show, and we really appreciate you. And today you are here to talk about something that we are so excited about. It is called Open a Channel. Can you please tell everybody what that is?
Yeah, it's a book about the women of Star Trek and their cultural influence, which I found out was pretty huge after talking to lots and lots of people in Europe and on the ocean and through Zoom. And also at the same time, you know, those of us who were working in the 90s, what actually our lives were like, what the cultural strictures were on us while we were projecting this amazing future for women, where, you know, we weren't put in boxes and we were side by side with the men. And I even got to talk to some of the guest stars from the 60s and hear their stories and understand what it was like for them to work in Hollywood back in the 60s. So it really kind of shows the progression through Star Trek of what being a woman actor was like through the years up to Strange New Worlds. And it changed me in many ways, which I did not expect. And people said that it would, and it was like, yeah, no, I'm approaching this as a job as usual. But you know, when you put your focus on anything and you start to dig, it's going to get personal. And it did very fast.
So what was the catalyst or the inspiration to begin writing this book?
I said yes to the offer. They had this idea, Ben Robinson, who's my editor, to do something on the women of Trek. And Dave Zappone actually said to him, who did all the Trek documentaries, you know, Nana would be a good fit for this. And so they approached me about the idea, and it was terrifying and overwhelming, like all good challenges are. And I said yes instead of no. And that was it. And very quickly, originally it was supposed to be a paragraph on each woman and picking almost like an archetype or a word that would represent her, and briefly talking about what the effect was on the audience of this character. But it soon, and bless Ben for allowing it to happen, it soon became this whole other approach when I started working on it.
You know, Nichelle Nichols is really the first woman of Trek, really like the first lady of Trek, I would say. And I wanted to ask you about your experiences meeting her throughout the years at conventions or different places, and what those conversations were like, what kind of impact she may have had on you in those discussions.
She had, I don't think, I mean, you can be open to it or not, but someone has got to pass down the idea of the responsibility of being in a show like this. And she very clearly, through example, through how she treated the audience, with the idea that this wasn't something to, be gracious in front, and then when you're backstage go, oh God, I can't stand this. It was down deep all the way through, sincere giving of herself. And that was the example that I think I imagine she spread through a lot of us. And it doesn't take long before you start to get the idea, once you go to the conventions and you talk and you get the feedback of what your character meant. But the way to do it with grace and dignity was pure, for me, pure Nichelle.
Absolutely. I felt the same thing. Just her presence alone, being around her, you felt the grace, the poise, the dignity, the way she carried herself, the way she dressed. Just was everything was so beautiful about her.
It was important, and she had something to give. And the work that she did, I don't know if you've seen the documentary of the work she did for the space. She meant it. She meant what she was saying, and you could tell. It was so sincere. And I think, it's so funny. Someone just, and I understand why they say it and what they mean, but they said, no, we need a new show on Deep Space Nine. Maybe Kira can be a grandmother. And, we default to the idea, I certainly default to this idea of a grandmother as a caretaker. Right. And mothers and caretakers are unbelievably important. But I think where women get shortchanged is the idea that they are mentors and can be mentors and must be mentors for each other. That we lift each other up with shared knowledge and experience. And the grandmother thing just always makes me feel like you're cutting that off, and now she's a tertiary character that can come in when needed. She's a support system as opposed to a pillar that, when you think of a man, and this could just be you are all younger than I am. So I have more cultural weights on me that I'm constantly becoming aware of and trying to get off of me, but still they're there. And when I think of mentor, I think man, because I didn't have women mentors other than my mother. So Nichelle, was a real mentor and was doing the real deal work. And it had the numbers, you could look at the numbers do not lie. And the numbers of people of color and women going into the space program grew because of what she did. It's a big deal.
Huge deal.
That was long-winded, round and round, but
not at all. Not at all. That's great.
Huge deal.
Nana, when I was preparing for today, I wrote down some keywords that come to mind when I think of you. And dynamic was one of the words. Brilliant is another word. Humble is another word. But I want to say, even though Nichelle laid down a lot of the groundwork for women in Star Trek, and then we had the Next Generation and, Denise Crosby and Gates McFadden and Marina, all playing instrumental roles. I feel like your character, Major Kira, was the first real leading role for a woman, where you weren't just a complementary character.
Right.
You were the focal point character. You were the lead of the show, and that makes you, in my opinion, really the first female lead in a Star Trek series, and I felt like you have over delivered in your performance as Major Kira. Another thing I wrote in my notes is that you don't get enough credit for the work that you did.
Thank you, sir.
Is that because you had to overcome some of the hurdles that were exist in Hollywood in the business that limit a woman's ceiling or a potential or ability to expand through the constraints of the character and these male-driven writers who don't have a full understanding? What were those constraints, things that you had to fight against in order to be yourself and in order to play this character?
I would, first of all, thank you for all the lovely things you said. And I would say, first of all, we had Ira Stephen Bear and Laura Bear, who, you know, do you know Laura? She's,
Yeah,
you know,
she's amazing.
Yeah.
a physicist and a ballerina. It's like, what?
Right.
And she really, and Ira, to his credit, listened to his partner about what a woman would be. I feel like the writing was all there. I don't feel like it constrained me. I feel like I had the advantage too that maybe the women in the first show didn't have, the next generation didn't have. They were watched and they stopped watching us. And I got to just do what I wanted, and so did Ira, and so did all the writers, without being too much controlled. Yes, there were changes to my hair and my costume, but I think really what constrained me was that I had spent so many years in Hollywood. I learned to fit myself into the box that was needed for a role on a set. There's so many times that you're told, look, if you don't want to do this, there are 10 more behind you. So I would quickly go, okay, I don't want to do that, but how can I have a career without? So it was basically, if I was born like this after Hollywood, I was like this. I was no longer free to go, have the energy to go, you know what I really like to do now is direct. I didn't have that energy. I also had the issue, which I asked so many of the women, no one, the women at ISA in Germany didn't have a good answer. No one has a good answer for a woman with children.
Right.
I had 2 children. So whatever I wanted to do, it was always my sole responsibility. Even when I was married, it was my sole responsibility to manage what was going to happen, to make all the decisions. And that's, you know, once you do that, once you're managing your energy on a set, he's getting attracted to me. I've got to work that. So that's energy out of your body too. I gotta find a way to get this work done without having a big problem here with this one. That's where I got sapped. And I got sapped because I was very willing to accept the cultural norms and go, and I think this is such a problematic phrase, and I heard it over and over again for the book. That's just the way it is. And I learned to accept this is the way it is. And yeah. And I fought myself. It was so interesting. Jess Bush on Strange New Worlds wants to direct. And my first, months before, my first thing, we were talking, and I supported her idea that she's got to really know what she's doing, be perfect, and because it's going to matter for the next woman to get that door open and keep it open. But after I talked to a lot more people, my mind changed and I went, what? There were men who directed our show, Ciroc. It was their first time. They weren't worried about the next man coming through. How impossible for a young woman to carry the weight of the women coming behind them on a creative project. How unfair. No, you take your shot and you learn what you can learn, but and take the next shot. And being afraid to fail is the worst thing you can do, right? With anything. It's going to guarantee that you are making yourself smaller. So I quickly wrote, or I think I contacted her and said, no. Learn everything you can. Absolutely. But then it just creatively let yourself be. Don't carry this weight. It's too much. It's unfair.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback off of what Ciroc has said. And because for me, watching you rise to the challenge that was put in front of you and doing it beautifully, masterfully, had such an impact on me during my adolescence. Kira was a survivor, and I see that a lot in you as well. And it helped me survive some things in my past that we won't go into, but that survival instinct that you have and that Kira had was really impacted me. So you did important work, whether you were trying to fit into a box or not. And Ciroc is absolutely right that you were a trailblazer in your own right. So thank you for that, for one. And two, and you're at it again, trailblazing with a new book. And I want to know is, what do you hope people who read the book will take away from it?
Well, first of all, let me say that when I said I fit myself into the culture, that was me, not Kira. Kira, I ran through the Kira door and went, this is what I want for life. This is how I want to be. And little by little, I learned to go, no, you know what? If people don't accept it, they don't accept it. I can't get back in the box. And I never really did. So to answer your question, I would say, and it's for all of us. It's not just for women. I hope what people get and makes people curious is the idea that the culture can have such an effect on the part of our brains that don't critically think. The part of our brains that's made for making quick decisions, shortcuts, what is that called? Heuristics. Our subconscious works that way. And the culture can drop all kinds of ideas. So up here, we're thinking, no, I don't have bias. But down here, where heuristics wants comfort, not discomfort, we make quick, easy decisions where we don't have to be responsible and for whatever's going on. And discomfort is stopping and going, wait a minute. What do I think about this? This may make a big difficulty in my life. If I align this bias, I may have to live differently, but let me sit down and think about that. That's uncomfortable. So we try to avoid that, right? So I would love for people to go, culture's going to do what the culture does. But if we are aware and we critically think, and it doesn't mean we have to rage against the machine. It just means that we have to be aware, I think. And this idea that Mike McMahon said, he said, if you love a system, you must question it. You must lovingly continue to question the system. that you are in, whatever system that is. This is a system, and that we question what we're doing and why we're doing it and what, so, and that goes all the way out to, global stuff, but questioning the system and doing it lovingly, and also just being aware when the culture is pulling your brain where you don't wish it to go. Because we live with that kind of dissonance all the time. And culture is a huge effect.
Nana, first of all, thank you for teaching me a new word. Heuristic is a mental shortcut that allows an individual to make a decision, pass judgment, or solve a problem quickly and with minimal effort, i.e., 95% of people on social media today. Look up that word, everybody.
Yeah. And let me just add, it's a very great thing if you're going to go, should I have a ham sandwich or a cheese sandwich? Heuristics is good. We don't need to have a million difficult questions in our heads. But when it comes to how do I treat this human being, or what do I think of these politics, then it's not a ham sandwich. We need to critically think. We need to bring it up to the part of our brains that it involves values and have that aligned.
Absolutely. And I do want you to know that people don't just compliment you to your face. They also say it when you're not around. I remember, since you mentioned David Zappone, I remember him calling you, quote, a force of nature. So I still remember that to this day. I was like, that guy nailed it right there, I think. But I did have a question to dive deeper into your journey with this upcoming book. And that is, when you're interviewing people, when you're bringing something together, you're documenting these things, you're bringing the book together, it tends to take a life of its own, right? You probably, I don't know whether you had a strong idea of where you wanted to go or a vague impression, but we know that at some point it kind of just started going off in its own direction, probably multiple times. And there had to be these moments where you thought, do I want to take it in that direction, or do I want to stay with where I'm going? Or there were some kind of moments there where it just kind of started going in its own way. Can you talk about that a little bit without too many spoilers?
No, just that it was, I don't think you can ever say with any project, no, I'm keeping my original idea in mind. You let it take it, because it wasn't me. It was these people and these, and I really, the most unbelievable thing, one of the big things I took away from it, one of the big shocks for me is how resilient, and I don't mean physically, the young human spirit is. Such a desire to fulfill who they think they are, that if there's no one else around that is going to support them, they find a damn TV show that is going to teach them what they need to know. And they take it seriously, and they take it with them through life. And I find that mind-blowing. That took my breath away. I heard it over and over and over again. And that it just made me go, these small humans, or humans in trouble, who are lost or don't know where they are yet, are just so determined to find their path. They don't give up, or the ones that I spoke to did not.
One of the things I think we see in the business is, especially in regards to women in Hollywood, is that beauty is the main factor for why a person is, chosen for a particular role. It's like, we're going to use attraction, their physical beauty, which you have an immense amount of beauty, I would say. I've been consistent on that, Nana. You're very beautiful. But yet, that's not what you leave us with when we watch you on screen. I don't walk away from an episode saying, "Oh, wow, she's just so beautiful." I walk away saying how amazing of a performer you are and how brilliant your mind is to be able to play with these roles in the way that you do, the comfort that you have being the intendant, or the sternness that you're able to meet Ducat with. And those are the things that resonate with me, your performance and your strength. Um, you know, I don't really have a question there. I just wanted to say,
I so appreciate that, because that's not like something that I got. And in the 90s, I was not considered a beautiful woman. I was basically more considered a character woman. I remember Candy, the hairstylist?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, I remember Candy.
So they brought me up to the offices and to show the hairstyle and the makeup. And she said, "Isn't she beautiful?" And the producer said, "No, she's not, but that's not what we hired her for." And that was simply the way it was. Simply the way it was. Now, I should be as sexy as I could possibly be, but Terry was the beautiful one. And Terry went through her own stuff, about which she goes into in the book, about having to be. We were all boxed, and if you are sexy, here's the good thing: you're going to be the girlfriend of the main character. That means you're going to get more screen time. That means you're going to get more fleshed out. That's why it's good to be the sexy one. Being a character, you're going to support the sexy one. And, that's why being an alien allowed me to be the most human woman I had ever been allowed to be. Because stick a nose on me and okay, she's not, it's okay. Give her a pass. She's yelling at the star of the show in the first few scenes of that wasn't allowed. Yelling at a man, unless I was evil, then I could yell. Or even the intendant. That level of sexuality was back then for the bad girl, for Veronica.
That was the attribute of a bad girl, somebody who was overly sexualized. So that was
overtly sexual. Yeah. But that Kira was allowed to have a sexual life, and I made the mistake of going into one of those rooms to read stuff. It was like, oh no, I can't do that. That's really scary stuff. But, it was discussed, and this was one done in the 90s of, wait a minute, she has multiple lovers. That's, and of course that would be okay for a man, but for a woman character, she's on the edge. She may not be someone that we want to root for. So, it was amazing that they allowed that.
How did writing this book activate certain different creative juices than the ones you're used to in theater and television?
I'm used to collaborating. I'm used to going to a place and seeing a lot of people. So you basically just, put your clothes on, show up, and some kind of spark is going to happen from the writers, from the other actors. Something's going to spark. But there were so many times I went, because my office is down. This is where I wrote the book. My office is downstairs, kind of in the basement. And I'd go upstairs and I'd tell my husband, Matthew, I can't do it. I'm overwhelmed. I cannot do this. And he would just go sit, go back down and sit. And that's what I needed to do, and sit with myself. And the self-reflection, the desperation to go, I don't have a way in. So I've got to use myself as a way in. And what did I go through in the 90s? What were the 90s like for me? What was walking down the street in the 80s like for me? And as I went through going to a doctor, walking down the street, how my entire life was affected and made smaller because I was a woman, I started to get angry, and it was like a paradigm shift. It was like lenses being taken off. And suddenly, I got impossible for a while. I really did. My boundaries changed. And it was like, no, I don't want you to say that in front of me. No, I can't do all the things. I've said this before, but not with you guys. So Samantha Cristoforetti, I got to interview her. She is the astronaut.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Up in the space station.
She comes to my house. She comes and sits in my house. And she is, at this time, a fighter pilot, Italian fighter pilot, an engineer, an astronaut. And when I interviewed her, she had 2 children under 5. And I said, my, dinosaur brain, I go, so you're about to go to the space station for months. What have you arranged for your children? And she looked at me and said, they're my husband's children and he is here. And I went, oh God, no. I'm used to, no matter what, the tone of the house, the way the house looks, feels, operates, the children, everything that they do is my responsibility. A partner in all that, and of course, that is how we have evolved, thank God. So immediately I was like, Matthew, you're not helping me in the kitchen anymore. We are each doing 20 minutes in the kitchen because it's our kitchen. It's not my responsibility, even though I cook. I love to cook, but cleaning it is us together. And he was like, yeah, that makes sense. He was, thank God, he was right there with it all. But this did cause seismic shifts in me and my life, and realizing that I don't have to go like this if someone wants to pass by me, that I can maintain myself and go, oh, you need to get by, let's arrange that. But I don't have to get out of the way.
I recently saw an interview with you on Trek culture where you said Star Trek teaches us 3 things. Can you tell us what those 3 things are, and are they in the book?
Yes. So you know how that came about? I was at a convention and this young soldier, chaplain, I found out, Chaplain Mel Bears, she said, I just want you to know I deal with people who have had trauma like you've had. And it's very, in the military, I see them maybe twice and then they're gone and I don't know what happens. And you gave me hope. And I said, thank you. And she was like this, when someone is a stunning human. Yeah. And she left and I went, what am I doing? She needs to be in the book, but she was gone. Oh. So I went on, it was still Twitter at the time, and said, listen, does anyone know this woman? Because I said to her, can I take a picture of you? Thank God I did that. And I put the picture out, and that day they said, this is who this is. And this chaplain who, when you think of what they do, they go out on the battlefield and they're there and they're comforting the dying and, doing the work and thinking these thoughts and living this life that would be unbearable without strong values. and a strong belief system, which she obviously also has. But she is a huge Gates McFadden fan. She loves the Doctor. She loves Dr. Crusher and loves Star Trek through her. And what she lives by, what she took from Star Trek is, and she says she takes it out onto the battlefield with her, is the idea of hope, that we need to have courage, and that none of us are ever alone.
Mm.
And that third one is so important when you think of how Trek, really the hope that Trek shows is that we are not alone. None of us are alone. There's always someone to help. And I really took that idea into my own life. And even on a day that I was by myself and I was working on my plants outside, I noticed the bees. And for the first time, instead of thinking of the bees as, something, just stay away from me, I thought, no, we're working together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not alone. The bees and I are working together here. And someone put pipes into the house so that I could get water. Someone did. And suddenly the house felt like it was full of people who had had a part. Of course, they got money for it. Doesn't matter. They still did it. What would I be doing without all of it? All this support, all this infrastructure of people. And I felt like my house was full. They didn't need to be there. The house was full.
That's wonderful. It's like a big community of animals and insects and people all working together. You're never alone. It just depends on your perspective, how you're looking at it.
Yeah.
And along those lines, you mentioned at the beginning of this that the making of this book changed you in some ways. Could you share with us any of those changes, whether they're just change in thought or change in directions?
Definitely boundaries. Definitely, there's nothing like looking at your life with a critical, compassionate, forgiving eye, forgiving for all the people that you were involved with or you went through things with, forgiving of yourself, compassion for understanding, instead of going, well, how could I do that? Why was I? It's like, that's where I was at that point. And it's almost like instead of abandoning Nana at 15, at 18, at all these ages, that I was impacted by culture and difficulties and men who behaved badly, but thought that they were doing maybe just what the culture expected of them. Instead of slicing them off and going, this is me now, it's almost like I gathered all those ages of me up and I hold them inside of me now. They're definitely, it's almost like putting yourself together in some kind of stew as opposed to, all laid out. And it there's a lot of self-acceptance in that. I've also realized how convenient it is for culture, and certainly was, for women to not mentor each other and not share.
Mm-hmm.
It's really great. These powerful beings are all separated much better for the powers that be. And the more we talk, the more we learn from each other, especially intergenerationally, the better.
Yeah.
I've got a lot to learn from younger people. I mean, Samantha's just one example, the chaplain, the young sex worker that I spoke to, where I understood what her life was like and how she got into that world, and is a Star Trek watcher. All those women helped me understand all the facets. And, whatever is the accepted perfect woman now, whatever you want to think that is, it's like going into a Japanese restaurant and saying, I'd like a burger. They may make it for you, but you're not getting the best of them. Get the best of whatever woman there is, which means just as she is and who she is. And we are all on a spectrum.
Mm-hmm. How is this book not just a book for women?
Ooh.
None of it really was. I mean, I was limited to focusing on the women, but really the people that got up and spoke to me were very often men, and saying how they were affected. One example is a young man who said, look, I grew up with a divorced mother at a time where it was not okay to be a divorced mother. And suddenly you realize that Dr. Crusher has a lot to teach to a little boy who has a professional mother, and none of the other moms at school are that. And you feel bad. You can go, yeah, but my mom's like Dr. Crusher. And you can get a sense of, I'm going to be okay, and she's okay too. Those examples of how men were affected. Also, I remember I can't remember what, I'm bad with linear time, but there was some time before it was just at the cusp of DS9. They were just starting to stream it. And there was this 15-year-old boy who came up to me and said, oh my gosh, I have such a crush on you on this show. And it was like, what? That's not what happened back in the day. Young men would have been like, oh, way too much. No. Or maybe some of them even then were affected and went, yeah, this is another version of a woman. And I kind of like it. It's okay. But that he was like going, yeah, no, there's no problem. You're angry? Yeah, of course. Of course, this is later. This is in the 2010s or something. So, of course, it was more accepted for a woman to have the full spectrum of emotions that we weren't allowed to have in the 90s.
Were you surprised when you were writing this that the people that you were interviewing had maybe similar, like these were conversations you guys never had before, and that was like, oh yes. I'm thinking about Kate Mulgrew or Mary Weissman or Rebecca Romaine. Were they like, oh my God, finally somebody's talking about this thing that I've kind of held inside in me this time. I've never really had anybody to bounce this off. Were there moments like that?
There were definitely. I unfortunately didn't get a chance to speak to Rebecca, but Mary and Kate, and there were some that were so emotionally affecting to hear what they went through. Just being an actor, being a woman, and being different, and how they dealt with it, how they came to it, what life was like for them. It made me, I mean, I used to be like, yeah, Deep Space Nine, that's the show, that's Star Trek to me. But now I feel like, wait a minute, what's Jess doing? Where is she? Kate, yay, she got the show. I feel I am on the teams of all these women. Why? Because I know more about them. Because now I'm invested. That's why talking is so important. If we're not invested in people's stories, we won't get them. We won't understand. And once you do, it's done. It's like, I care about Melissa Navia and what is she trying to do? And I want to see her get there. And I love what she does so much on her show. Kate understanding what she went through. Jerry Ryan. That, and I met with my bias, very much so, because the heuristics for me were 7 of 9. They're using her as a sexual thing on all these posters. oh, that's taking us back to another place. This is awful. And I never bothered to watch. That was my decision, and I never bothered to watch. When I actually watched the show and understood the character and understood what that, not only the relationship for two women, which was mentoring, mothering, it was everything. I also understood my bias about sexuality, because it was like, oh, the sexy one, she's going to get everything. Because that's how we were all brought up. Instead of, who is that woman? Who is she? What's going on? What is she bringing? What can she teach me? I wouldn't stay open enough for that before. And now I'm a lot less quick to make those easy, comfortable snap decisions. I want in more.
Now, Nana, we only have you for a few more seconds here. But before you go, very important, the book is released October 1st, 2024, correct? Right now, people are saying, what? I don't want to wait that long to get it. You don't have to. You can actually pre-order it right now. So it will be at your door on October 1st. That's the best deal. You could literally just go click 2 buttons and know that on October 1st, it'll be at your door and you could just dive into it. You can find it anywhere. I'm looking at it right now on Amazon.com. There's literally a button. It just says pre-order now. And it says it will be delivered on Tuesday, October 1st. So everybody definitely go check that out. We'll include that link in the description box below. Nana, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We really appreciate you and your time.
Yeah.
Always fun. Thank you so much, each one of you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Stick around. We got way more good stuff. I don't know how we're going to top this, but we'll see you soon on Virtual TrekCon 5.